Begin in Ivory Coast, where prominent militia leader Ibrahim Coulibaly has been killed. Coulibaly helped drive former President Laurent Gbagbo from power. A government ministry spokesperson says he was killed during a gun battle in Abobo, a neighborhood in Abidjan. Joining us now on the phone with more details is VOA West Africa correspondent Scott Stearns. Scott, first shed some light on who really was Ibrahim Coulibaly.
Mr. Coulibaly was a prominent militia leader in the Abobo neighborhood who had been against former President Laurent Gbagbo for some time, and it was really his militia who became known as the Invisible Commandos earlier this year, who began the final stage of the armed rebellion against what was then the Gbagbo government, well before the former rebels who were directly supporting the current president, Alassane Ouattara, began their campaign along the Liberian border.
Now, having fought alongside Ouattara's men, what really went wrong so that he ended up being killed?
The problem was largely one between Mr. Coulibaly and Guillaume Soro, who is the former rebel leader. More importantly, he is President Ouattara's prime minister and minister of defense. Mr. Soro says that on more than one occasion, Mr. Coulibaly's militia tried to assassinate him when he was the prime minister for the former president, Laurent Gbagbo. So clearly, there's some bad blood between Mr. Soro and Mr. Coulibaly. Mr. Coulibaly, after former President Gbagbo was captured, said that he deserved some recognition for beginning this final push in Abidjan and for his efforts against the Gbagbo government. And the Ouattara government said, well, what you really need to do is you need to disarm. The Ouattara government says those troops were not disarming, and that's why they had to go into Abobo by force in part of the gun battle that ultimately killed Mr. Coulibaly. Some of Mr. Coulibaly's aides say they were willing to disarm and were actually in the process of turning over their arms to the United Nations force there when they were attacked by the Ouattara forces.
Now, are there any concerns that this might set off another conflict, possibly between the sympathizers of Coulibaly and perhaps fighters aligned to Soro?
Well, it certainly could. It all depends on what happens now in Abobo, and what happens to the Coulibaly militia. Are they disarmed? Are they incorporated into what was the Force Nouvelle and is now the Force Républicaine? It is a potential problem for President Ouattara, especially because he's also facing continuing violence in the Yopougon neighborhood of Abidjan, where some Gbagbo loyalists are holding out. He seems to have solved one of his problems, but that for him cannot be a continued distraction if he's really going to solve the problem in Yopougon.
Well, we've run out of time. Scott, thanks a lot for that update. And that's Scott Stearns reporting from West Africa.